Okay, so today we're going to continue on working with Jupyter Notebooks and Python and machine learning. And to do that, we're going to talk about a library we're going to need specifically to work with our data. And that library is called Pandas. Aren't they adorable? Oh, no, we're not talking about the adorable type of pandas. We are talking about a Python library called Pandas that's going to help us work with data. So to start that process, let's go through getting into our notebooks again by going through our terminal to our, or command prompt terminal to our Jupyter Notebook. So if you remember last time we had to change directories, so cd desktop, cd machine learning. Here we are inside the desktop, inside this folder on the desktop, which, if you remember correctly last time, is where my virtual notebook is, and where my virtual library is, where my virtual environment is. So we're gonna type source venv bin activate. Remember that if you are on a Windows machine, that command is going to be a little bit different for you. And remember that I've done it, so now you can see at the beginning of my prompt here, I am in fact in my virtual environment, which is great. One of the things, so obviously to work with Pandas, we need to first install Pandas, because Pandas is a Python library. To do that, we're going to type pip3 install Pandas. And we're going to let our machine go through the install process of Pandas. Remember, you really want to be in your virtual environment when you do this so that you are installing Pandas for your project, and you can manage your installs and your packages a lot more carefully if they're all in your virtual environment. So please make sure you're in your virtual environment. When that's all done, we're going to go ahead and start up our Jupyter Notebook by typing Jupyter Notebook. Having installed Pandas means that inside of our notebooks, we now have access to Pandas. So let's go ahead and make a new notebook. And this will be our Pandas notebook. So I'm going to retitle it Pandas. Okay. And it should look pretty similar to what we had before. So if you want to use a library in a notebook like this, just like you would in any script file, we have to import what we want. In this case, we want to import Pandas, and you can give it a short name. Common for Pandas is PD, and that'll allow us to reference the whole Pandas library with just the letters P and D. And you notice that worked. If we hadn't first installed Pandas, this wouldn't work. It would have given us an error that it couldn't find Pandas. So make sure before you get into the Jupyter Notebook, you install the libraries you want to use. If you need to, you can install from the Jupyter Notebook, although it's not great because if you rerun those cells and whatnot, you might end up installing newer versions that you weren't working with over a longer project. So generally, good practice is install when you're going to use the library and then go from there before you use the library actually in the notebook. Okay, so something to know about Pandas particularly is that they have two data types. So I'm just gonna that we're gonna particularly worry about. Okay, the first one is a series, which is a one-dimensional you could call it a set of data. You might think about this like a traditional list or array. A series is. It has a few more things going on that are specific to Pandas, but in conceptually, it's really just a list or a collection of one-dimensional data, as opposed to a data frame, which is a, and this is more common when we're dealing in, this is why you come into Pandas traditionally to get into using data frames, right? And this is a two-dimensional, typically dealing with rows and columns. I think of this a lot like you would any other table or spreadsheet program. That's kind of what data frames are. So those are our data types right there, series and data frames for the most part. Let's start off by making a series. We're going to make a series called cars. Notice again, we're in Python, so we don't need any sort of reserved keyword to make a new variable. No var, no let, nothing like that. We can just write cars. To make a new series, we use the pandas library. Remember, we don't have to type pandas now. We can just type PD and the capital word series. And then we open up parentheses, and we are going to pass it a list in brackets. So in this case, we could write Toyota, Honda, Toyota. Actually, sorry, I should close my parentheses, put a comma, Honda. And actually, in this case, it might even be better to be using single quotes rather than double quotes. But since I've started with double quotes, I'm going to continue on with that. And let's say a Kia. Okay. And there we've made a series called Cars. And then if we wanted to see what that series looks like, we could just type cars there, hit shift and enter, and you'll notice some pieces of information, right? It's not a traditional list. Partially, it's got this sort of like column shape to it. It's indexed it, right? 0 is Toyota, 1 is Honda, 2 is Kia, and you'll see its data type is object. We could make another series. Let's call it colors. Again, open brackets, and we could have red, blue, and pink. Okay. And then if you wanted to see what this looked like, same sort of thing, right? Red, blue, pink. Data type is object. Everything's indexed, so on and so forth. So this is really what a series is. But what if we wanted to make a data frame? Okay, if we wanted to make a data frame, we could actually use our multiple series because now we've got two one-dimensional pieces of data. So we could combine those two one-dimensional pieces of data and actually make a two-dimensional data, or what we would call a data frame. So you can combine series into data frames, and we could do it like this. Car data is equal to PD again, calling the pandas library, this time using the data frame initializer, or constructor, if you will. And we're going to pass it a dictionary, essentially. And that dictionary is encased in curly brackets. So we have car type. And then we do a colon, and we pass it the cars series, comma. Typically, when you're building a dictionary like this in Python, but Jupyter Notebook particularly, hitting enter in between these things is a good practice. And then we can say color, and we can pass it the color series. And now we close this off. And let's see what our car data frame looks like. Okay, so you'll notice a few things, that the values have stayed pretty much the same. The columns now have labels. The labels we gave them up here: car type, color, 0, 1, 2. In terms of a data frame, I want to show you how the anatomy of a data frame kind of works, right? So we don't have all this data yet, but I want to show you each individual piece here is what we call a data. These are the column names. These are the columns. This is considered axis 1. These are what we call the index numbers, and it starts at 0 by default. And then this is the row. We call this axis 0. So later on, you'll be asked about the axes you want to be working on, whether you want to be working on the 1 axis or the 0 axis. And just be aware that 0 axis is referring to a row, whereas axis 1 is referring to columns, okay? by columns. So that is a data frame. And you can see it took the values in each one of our series and made that data frame. So here's what you're going to do. I would like to see you make a data frame of all the people in the class. I want their favorite foods and their favorite colors. So make 3 series, names of people in class, favorite foods, colors, and then I'd like to see you combine those 3 series into a larger data frame. Good luck.